Welcome to the Braver Angels podcast, a new way of talking politics. I'm your host, Kieran O'Connor. I'm joined today for the second time by my co-host, Carlos Hernandez, the red chair of the San Francisco Braver Angels Alliance. I'm also joined by my friend and colleague, Julie Boler, a partnership specialist for Braver Angels and a passionate and eloquent Blue. We also have a special guest today, Mr. James Allen, and I will turn things over to Carlos to do the illustrious introductions.
Thank you to all, and I'm not going to hide how much Jim's friendship and how dear he is to me. We were fortunate enough to have lunch somewhere in the United States last Friday. Mr. Allen has fought and defended our country. He'll speak to the capacity. And what's unique about Mr. Allen, i.e. being a trained warrior, is also a dad. And he just had his youngest daughter married a couple of weeks ago. And he also had transformation in his post-military career to become a Christian pastor. On top of that, he's a facilitator of young college men through a fraternity that I belong to. And on top of that, he's a leadership coach. Life Warriors is his hashtag, and he'll talk more about that. And welcome, Mr. Allen, to our show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to be here. Gosh, it seems like listening to list all that off, Carlos, I need to retire. Too much.
So, Karen, why don't we have our guests introduce themselves with their own personal flavor? And Julia, how about you introduce yourself with a personal touch?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Boler. I'm partnership specialist for Braver Angels. I started as a volunteer in 2018 with then Better Angels and joined the leadership team about a little over a year ago, and have had a couple different roles. And my background is mostly in nonprofit work and writing. I think that a couple of positions I've held that really inform my policies today, a couple things that I might bring up on today's call so they're relevant. One is I spent 10 years at the CDC National HIV and AIDS Hotline, and started on the hotline and did everything from training and curriculum writing to managing and supervising teams. And I'll refer back to that when there's a policy issue that I want to talk about. And also with the Wake County Public School System, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I worked for about 7 years counseling young people from impoverished families, mostly young Black males that were at very high risk of gang involvement and dropout and drug use, and helping them manage some of their emotional and behavioral problems that were interfering with their schooling. I have 3 grown kids, each with their own beautiful families, 3 grandkids. And I think that's it for my introduction. You're muted, Carlos.
How about that? Technical details.
Hard to remember, yeah.
Yes. Jim, how about you introduce yourself?
Okay. It is nice to meet you, Julie. Nice to hear your accomplishments, and it's great to be here to be able to discuss some of these serious issues tonight. But yeah, I'm James Allen. I was 13-year spec warfare in the United States military, another 11 years with another government agency. 24 years there, and a total of 31 years of training police, military, and private security in hand-to-hand combat, the rigors of war, and those types of things. right now I currently own Guard1. It's a private security company. I'm a keynote speaker, a life coach, as Carlos mentioned, of several business owners around the country, and we just discuss life issues. Dad of 5 children. I did just have a daughter get married a couple weeks ago. I am very serious about my faith. I, as well, to training police, I was also a chaplain for a police department in Southern California. In that capacity, I would go out and do death notifications and those types of things with families who've lost someone in one manner or another. And so I have a varied career in that area. So again, it's just an honor to be here and be able to discuss this. And I think it's a serious topic, and I'm really proud and excited about what Braver Angels is doing.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn this back now to Kieran to talk about a short while, Hold AmericaTogether, and then we'll launch into our questions. And I'll have you ask the questions first of Julie. Go ahead, Kieran.
Sure. Well, as Carlos mentioned, we have organized Braver Angels for the next 2 weeks and after the election around 2 centerpiece initiatives. One is Hold America Together. This is an effort to call upon Americans, regardless of their partisan affiliation, to commit to embracing a higher partisanship that is dedicated to holding the union together and specifically to rejecting violence, the violence that some would call for or excuse. The second initiative, which Julie has been leading and helping drive forward in communities and colleges and churches around the country, is called With Malice Toward None. And With Malice Toward None asks us to look inwards and to try to buy into the idea of confronting the hostility that we may feel toward those who vote differently from us in the election, and to thinking about how we can try to privilege understanding over disdain, even when it feels hard. That's the context that undergirds our conversation here today. And I think it might be worth asking both of you, Julie and James, what do you hope for America? It's a broad question, but how do you hope America will respond and react to this election, regardless of who wins? Obviously, we're in an incredibly divisive time, but we still are one country, and we still do need to work together so that not just we, but also our children and our grandchildren can continue to drive forward the tangible manifestations of the ideals that we articulate in the Constitution, the pursuit of a more perfect union. So Julie, maybe I'll start with you, talk about what you hope for, then we can go over to James, and Carlos, feel free to weigh in as my co-pilot here.
Thank you so much, Karen. And you mentioned that I've been working on our initiative With Malice Toward None, and it has amplified for me what I hope for, regardless of who wins, is that we find a way to treat those who voted differently from us with respect and compassion and humility, depending on, which side you're on. Some of us are going to be thrilled with the results of the election, and some of us are going to be devastated in some cases. And for both of those groups, there are going to be temptations. For those who are glad about who won, that the temptation might be to just write off the other side, to exhibit triumphalism and be dismissive, or to sort of convey that now that we've won, we don't have to take into consideration any of your concerns. So, and on the other side, for those who lose, it's very understandable if folks feel just bitter and cynical and maybe feel like detaching from the process or becoming angrier than ever. There's a lot of different ways it could go. And so with the project that we're working on, and with a lot of other organizations across the country kind of looking at this issue right now, the idea is to commit ahead of time that no matter who wins or loses, you're going to make this effort. And the only other thing I'll say about that is that we started working on this project months ago, and already at the time it just felt like, oh, this is so urgent. Everything's so intense. We've really got to kick in and make something happen here. And since then, I guess that was early summer or something, and it's just like week by week, day by day, it seems more and more intense and bitter and scary. So as much as I think some people feel like it's impossible for us to work together, I think the stakes are really high right now, and to keep the country from falling to pieces, we've got to make this effort. So that I hope that people will come around to that and do some of that work.
Thank you, Julie. And Jim, what is your perspective regarding hope for our nation?
Well, first of all, I want to say I couldn't agree more with what Julie said. Make the effort. Julie, with what you just said, really jumped out at me, and that is exactly what I think people need to stand on. But what I hope for is, I mean, this will sound silly because people throw words around in our country a lot of times and they lose meaning, but I hope for peace. I mean, we are so divided right now. It breaks my heart. And so I think people need to not only feel peace, but the 31 years or so that I defended the freedoms of this country, and I say this for a reason, that's sure not bragging because many, many, many have done way more. But freedom is the key word. I didn't defend this country so people would agree with me or say my way is the right way. We are a free nation. And I think people need to have the freedom to vote the way they want to vote, to have the freedom to feel the way they want to feel, without hate and without fear. We've become very, very divided. So what I hope for is going back to what Julie said, is that people make the effort. Listen, in the past, there have probably been presidents in the past that we have all maybe not liked as much as others, or maybe not agreed with, but something is changing in society. The process is still pretty much the same. The people are changing, and hate is becoming more prevalent, and anger and rage. And I would say that what I hope for is just peace in that. And again, as Julie said, make that effort. The word hate to me is a very, very serious word. I feel that to make that effort, if people are, if they have hate in their heart, if they have deep rage inside them, if they have racism inside of them, I would push back that it probably has little to do with the president and more to do with the heart. What is going on? Because I don't personally give the president the authority to come into my life and generate those type of emotions inside of me. And so I worry about society as a whole. I worry about what's going on. So again, I would stand on the word peace is what I'm hoping for. And people can be accepted right where they're at.
Thank you for that. And Karen, how about you ask a follow-up question out of curiosity, then I'll do the same. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious to hear why you guys think we're so divided. Maybe start with James this time and then go to Julie.
Okay. Well, I think, the easy answer is, it might not just be easy, but I think social media, I think that we have such an instant gratification mentality today that we reach for what's fast. And I think one of the things we're doing is we're losing the ability to think for ourselves. I think we're losing the ability to detach and let things kind of run through our mind and heart and think, gosh, is that fair? Is that right? I grew up in a small farm town in Nebraska. There was no color. It was just, it was Germans and it was Swedes and it was, you know, and, but I grew up with a mom who taught me valuable lessons about difference and that we're all the same in some way. I think that we're getting away from empathy towards one another. I think that if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong. And if you continue to be wrong, then I'll up the ante and I'll maybe even use harsher words to try and hurt you for being different than me. And that's unacceptable to me. Again, I'll go back to that word freedom. People are free in this country to feel how they want to feel. And when we lose empathy, when we can start using hateful words that we launch at each other, and there's no empathy, society can get very, very dangerous.
Thank you, Jim. Julie?
I guess I would point to two things. One is the first thing that James mentioned, and I know what you mean when you said it's the easy thing to point to, James, because I feel like it's so obvious to talk about social media. And I would also, you may have said this too, but the 24-hour news cycle, cable news, it seems really too oversimplified or something, but I think you cannot say enough about the intensity. We've studied how people behave in online arguments, and it's not just when you're anonymous. That was something that came out fairly long ago, years ago, looking at how people write on message boards or comment sections of articles. And I laugh because a group of my discussion group I'm in, we have an intervention that we stage for anybody that goes into the comments section of an article because it's so bad. And there's really no point of it, but people are starting to act like that, just like on Facebook with people that they know through Facebook. And it's horrifying, the degree of hostility and accusation and distrust that's there. And so I don't know what the chicken or the egg here is with social media. I do think it feeds on itself and makes things worse. And I certainly don't know what the solution is, because the question of any kind of safeguards in that realm is so complicated and treacherous. So, but that's, I think, a reason. I also have to say, and this will probably reflect more of my blue perspective, that when society, when class issues in our society are as intensely presenting as they are now, when the divide between the haves and the have-nots, or the just the level of difference that is in the way people live right now in society, the access that some people have to just ordinary services and opportunities for self-advancement, that there are legions of people who, for a variety of complicated reasons, don't have the same access to opportunity. And I was cheered recently on a Braver Angels debate, hearing from Reds. I can't even remember what prompted this exactly, but a number of Reds talked about wanting equality of opportunity. And I think that's what blues want also. I think sometimes we're seen as wanting to give people equality somehow, to put them in a position that they're financially equal to somebody else who may have pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps or something. And equality of opportunity is actually what we want. And gosh, I hope I didn't go on too big of a tangent. My point there is that when things are that divided in terms of class, in I think any society, you start to have more intensity in the way people are talking about social issues and economic issues. And I think that's part of what.
Thank you, Julie. And James, I have a question of curiosity for you. I recall drawing on our history where you have talked about the V word, violence. And here you are, highly trained to defend our nation. You train officers, but you also said from the stage your own personal reflections on violence. Could you please share that with the audience?
Well, yeah, violence is a horrific thing. Most Americans have no idea what real violence is like, thankfully, because despite of what, whichever media outlet you pay attention to or social media, we still have a lot of safety and security in our country. But violence is a horrific thing, and people really don't want to be a part of it. I've been in countries where they've done away with law enforcement. They've done away with that security element, and I've been there when they've imploded. But violence absolutely turns my stomach. I think a lot of times when I show up to train people, they'll think this alpha male's coming in to thump his chest, and we're going to talk about how cool we are or how tough we are because we either have weapons or we know how to do certain things. And what they get is something quite different. Fighting is barbaric. I would give my life for this country. I would give my life to defend the innocent. That is different than just pouring violence out. And even that is a sickening thing. But I spend more time telling people why you do not want to get involved in violence, why you would want to avoid it. So it's a touchy subject to me. I've seen it on extreme levels. I've been on the receiving end and I've been on the giving end, and it's a horrible thing. And I want to say something real quick, if I might, on division, as Carrion asked that question. I want to just slip this in real quick. I also think something that can divide us is, and I know for Braver Angels, you have the blue representing blue and you have the red, but as a whole, as a country, I mean, even that divides us, because there has to be a winner, then there's a loser. And we're losing the ability to be kind of one nation. And I understand the different views, but I would almost push. I mean, it's interesting to me because if you don't agree, then you're my enemy. And it's like, I had a pilot in the military that I did not like. He was not a very nice guy. I never sat in the back of that helicopter and wanted him to die or fail. And so I have had presidents, commanders in chief in this country that I didn't particularly care for, but I wanted them to be the best president this country has ever seen, because it's our country. And I think we need to be careful. The winning, the losing, the red, the blue, the left, the right, all the names that are out there. And I truly believe if you come in about 20, 25 degrees from each side of that scale, Americans have a lot more in common than maybe certain outlets and things want us to believe we have. I am sitting and listening to Julie, who we might have total different views, and not one thing has come out of her mouth that I don't think is absolutely true and worth listening to. And so we need to get over these hurdles of being different, and we need to accept the fact that we have a great country and we can learn from each other. And if there are people held down in this country, economically, the racism issue, all those issues that are real, then we need to come together and figure out how we're going to fix this. We're not going to fix it by escalating it, name calling. We're not going to end racism with more racism. We're not going to end hate with more hate. And so if someone's listening to this and I let you down as the alpha male, I'm sorry, because I'll tell you what, we need to come together and work together and respect each other. So.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Carrie, how about we go back to you to ask the question around their fears?
Sure. Well, I think you guys both mentioned, as part of your answers about what you hope for, some of your fears as well, because I think the two are inextricably linked. So I guess I would frame the question as, what can we do as citizens, families, communities, and a country to try to meet the aspirations of our hopes and head off, the worst implications of our fears. What can we do, both as individuals and as leaders in our community and our nation? Julie, maybe I can start with you for this one.
Sure. And before I answer that, I just wanted to say some of the same things back to James. I'm just feeling so much respect for everything that you've said so far. And it's funny, I say so far, but because of how you're saying everything, I think I would feel the same respect, even if it was something that I really disagreed with. And I also wanted to just touch on the what you raised about the labels and the red, blue. And I think it's such a critical question. And we'll get a lot of questions about it sometimes in Braver Angels. One of our most central signature pieces of programming is the red, blue workshop. And to participate, you have to pick sides. And I think that if you go through an experience like that and kind of go with the side that you most lean to, and it gives a little more sharp relief to the policy questions that come up and the backgrounds people share about how they came to their point of view. And by the end of that session, I think there's some stuff that's come out that you've been able to process in a new way that might not have come out with a big circle of purples talking. At the same time, it's an important question to think about. So I tend to use it pretty easily and talk about the debate in that way, but I wanted to acknowledge your point about the importance of just paying attention to it. And in terms of what we can do, Karen, your question, I think I like that you separated what we can do as leaders and what we can do as individuals. And I think as leaders, people that are drawn to being in leadership roles, to do public work, there's a lot of different ways that you can go. There are movements towards centrism that don't necessarily appeal to me politically. There are movements towards bipartisanism that I think are interesting. And I just recently signed up for the National Institute for Civil Discourse's program where you can receive a brief that's been written about a policy issue. And it's very complex and very well researched. And then you read it and you weigh in on that, and they're getting people from both sides to do that. So I think that kind of public or policy level work is important. As individuals, I think my focus for the next little while is going to be on talking to people on my own side who are driving me crazy with their stubbornness about depolarization work and talking about it like it's something we don't have time for right now, which I think is the opposite is true. It's more important now than ever. And just trying to coax people along to, well, I said it at the beginning and James liked it, to make the effort to at least try some of this work. So I'm going to be working on people I share views with to influence their approach to people who believe differently than we do.
Thank you, Julie. And a question for Jim. Jim, my first question is tongue-in-cheek. The next one's serious. Tell the audience about the scariest mission you've been on. And this more serious question, you're a pastor. You also work with college men. What fears do you hear from them, and how do you assuage them?
That's interesting. Well, I know why Carlos is asking the scariest mission, because I went to his house in San Francisco one time, and we were walking down the street, and I jokingly said, "This might be the scariest mission I've ever been on, is going to lunch with Carlos." So he said I was totally safe, so I had him as a bodyguard. The second part, Carlos, more serious, as a former pastor, and you were talking about the college, the fears of college aged young men and women, and the fears that they have. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, and then how do you work with them? How do you work with them?
Well, I said it a little bit earlier, and I think it's very important that, man, I'll tell you what, I just spoke with my coaching group on empathy, and I was talking about, we're talking about being a life warrior. What does that mean to be a warrior in life? How do we fight and stand up for what we think is right and that type of stuff? And one of the last studies we did was on empathy. I'm very serious about that word. So I think you can get, as Julie's mentioned, certain classes. We can get in a class or be from a class of people, or go to a certain college. You can drive a certain car. You can afford certain clothes. You can, unfortunately, it can go by color of skin at times in our country. And we can start thinking we're someone because of that. When in fact, if we ever start losing empathy for the people around us, not being able to relate to where they are, we're in a lot of trouble. So one of the things I try and do with mostly, young men, is just, you might be from northeastern the United States, but can you relate to someone from New Mexico? Can you hear their words? Can you push the world back for a moment, not worry about your phone and all these other things, and just hear the words that are being spoken, and be able to relate to them and take out what you can. And the more we can relate to one another, I think that the stronger we can be. I just did a wedding in Northern California. A young man I've mentored, and he asked me to come in and do his wedding, and it was a wonderful privilege. But there was a fight at the wedding. And unfortunately, I got involved in breaking it up. Of course, alcohol was involved, and one of the young men had a different sexual preference than the other, and someone was offended by that. And these two men are brothers, and they took swings at each other, and it absolutely broke my heart. Fortunately, they do love each other. Fortunately, we could discuss it. But I'll tell you, we better be able to push ourselves back from whatever table we think we're sitting at, where we think we're right. Because I'll tell you what the world doesn't need more of is more Jim. What the world needs more of is more truth and compassion and love. And to be able to separate myself and listen to someone and say, listen, you're free to feel that way. Even though I might not be able to relate to those feelings, can I just instill in other people, in the time I have left on this planet, that we can make a difference and make things better by just loving and showing empathy and being able to step back and trying our best to relate to one another. I don't care color of skin. I don't care sexual preference. I don't care rich, poor. Can we try our best to relate to each other? Because that is what can make us strong. And that's what, a free country is all about. And so I don't know if that answered your question, Carlos, but I try and just instill that in young men or women, just to be able to relate to one another. You bet.
Thank you. And I'm going to nudge my captain of the airways here. And if he has I'm looking at the clock, and Wonder if he has a question of curiosity for either of our two guests.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious to know what your thoughts on President Trump are and what his role is in unity or division, particularly if he gets reelected.
Are you speaking to me, Kieran?
Sure,
Jim?
yeah, Jim, why don't you start, and then Julie, go ahead.
So what am I feeling? Can you reframe that for me one more time, Kieran?
Yeah, I'm curious as to what your feelings are on President Trump and what his role is in uniting us or dividing us.
I'm probably unique in that. First of all, when we say we're red or we say we're a blue, everybody automatically thinks you wholeheartedly agree with your team's captain. There are things I probably agree with. There's things I disagree with. And so I would push back on the fact that in a free country, I do not feel, and people will probably get irate at this, I do not feel the president lays down as much as what the country thinks he does, because I have an area of influence that I influence daily. I have 5 children. I have friends. I have a business. I have employees type thing. The president doesn't stand on my doorstep and dictate to me how I act and how I treat my fellow man. I decide that. And when a president tries to do that, that wouldn't go over well, because that is no longer a free country. That's more a communistic mentality. And so I have had presidents in the past that I didn't particularly care for. Guess what? I was the same person. I loved the way I loved. I cared for people. I tried to make a difference. If President Trump wins, I really don't know what he's going to do or not do for unity. As we all know, he can be a loose cannon. But I feel the word that gets thrown at him a lot is bully. There's a lot of ways to be bullied. There's a visible bully and there's behind the scenes bullies. And I think a lot of politicians can be bullies. What we have to decide with no matter who lands in that seat is, who am I going to be? What am I going to decide to do? How am I going to treat my neighbors? And just real quick, and I know I'm going to quote the Bible, and probably a lot of people on here might not want to hear that, but just listen to it as a teaching manual if you want, for lack of a better terms. If you don't have faith, that's fine. But in Romans 12:30 and Matthew 12:30 and 31, Jesus was outside and he was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he responded to this group of men that were kind of like the Harvard grads of the Jewish faith at the time. And they wanted him to quote what was the greatest commandment. And really they were trying to catch him in a little bit of a snare. And he said, the greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. He said, then the next is this: love your neighbor as yourself. Kieran, Julie, and Carlos, I think as a person of faith, I'm fairly embarrassed by the church. I'm fairly embarrassed by the Christian activity and what's going on. Why aren't we stepping out and saying we're not okay with hate? We're not okay with racism. We're not okay with the injustices that are going on that Julie so eloquently has brought up. We're not okay with those things, but we stay kind of hidden in the background. So when you love your neighbor as yourself, I want to be very clear to point out what Jesus said. Love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't say love your neighbor as yourself if they have the same color skin as you, if they have the same sexual orientation as you, if they have the same, they vote the same way as you, and on and on. We put all these stipulations on there that are dividing this country in some ways, and we all do it. But I challenge people of faith. Maybe we need to step out. Maybe we need to have a march through those communities. And someone told me recently when I brought that up, well, that would be dangerous. And, someone might throw rocks at you. And I would say this: maybe it's time that believers get a little dangerous. And maybe the weapon of choice is love. Stop running out and buying guns in massive quantities. And let's give a hoot. I almost went Navy voice on you guys. Let's care about our fellow man. the men and women that live beside us. So going back to it, I don't know how he's going to do it, but I know no matter who wins, I'm going to be the same person, whether I agree with him or disagree with him. I've got to be the best person I can be.
Thank you for that. And Julie, your thoughts?
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that, James, because it does give me a framework to use to think about something that's really hard for me to understand, which is there are a lot of Trump supporters that I've had an opportunity to meet in my work that are people that I care about and respect in many ways. And on some of the national calls that I've been on, people that have called in and raised hands and chimed in have talked about, well, I don't like Trump's personality, but I like his policies so much that I don't want to vote for the other person. And what you've added, the dimension that you've added there is that no matter what, you're going to be able to use your own guiding principles for how you behave, how you teach your children to behave. And you're a leader, obviously, in several different areas. And so you have the kind of wherewithal and strength of character and personality that could be a good influence on behavior, on values, regardless of the person at the very top of our governmental structure and internationally often considered, you know, the leader of the free world. But there are many people who are highly influenced by the behavior of that person and the attitude and the values of that person or lack thereof. And I just wonder, it's hard, I wonder at what point, how bad somebody's character has to be in a position that high, that influential, that important, before you're willing to say the policies are going to have to come second this time, because he's helping to tear apart the fabric of our society, and we won't even have a chance to argue about policies if we no longer have a working democracy. And it is a rhetorical question. I'm not accusing anyone of making the wrong assessment of that, because it's a very personal assessment, but it is a haunting question for me that, and Kieran framed this a little bit in, what do you think will be his behavior or attitude after, if he's reelected? And that scares me a lot, because he's obviously had no special affinity for decorum, playing by the social rules, even behaving towards people like our allies or our fallen soldiers with particular respect and care. And if he's reelected with that having been the case for 4 years, that's just, it's affirmation, it's emboldening, I guess. So I worry about whether his behavior and attitudes would become even more egregious and having even stronger impact on us.
Thank you, Julie. And Kieran, how are we doing on time?
We can wrap up now, or Carlos, if you have any final questions, I would say now's the time.
Thank you. I do have a question out of curiosity, Julie. You used a term a little while ago, personal strength. You work for an organization. I volunteer for it. How do you personally withstand even casual remarks at the water cooler, by the coffee machine, even though we're not in the office anymore, as to why Braver Angels doesn't come down and declare Trump to be X, Y, and Z? Yet you and I, and Carrion too, we're still on mission. How do you handle that challenge personally within yourself?
Let me make sure I understand your question correctly. Do you mean sort of like what I said about people on my own side not wanting to get on board with depolarization work?
Correct.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. What I try to do is realize that for myself, depolarization is hard. It's very challenging. I just went into some of my fears about Trump, and I could go on and on about that. But I want to end the call when we do by backing up and saying, I respect everybody making their own decision, and it is work. It is hard work. If we had a water cooler situation like you're talking about, and I hear jibes like that, Braver Angels is just trying to do the easy thing, or be namby-pamby, nicey-nicey. And I just say this work is not for the faint of heart. And I have pride in doing it.
Thank you.
So
and Jim,
I hope that answers the question.
No, we're fine. And Jim, I could give you a little chance here to plug the work you do. How could someone reach you to become a life warrior?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thanks for this, and Julie, just your being so candid in who you are. I'd love to sit down and talk with you sometime. I love what you guys are doing as a whole, Carrion. Same for you, though I don't know you really well. I love you being a part of this, Carlos. I've known you for years, and I appreciate what you're doing. This is important. And I saw the passion that Julie had in speaking about Trump just a second ago. We could debate and go back and forth on things, and that's not what this is about. What this is about is how are we going to move forward? Because someone is going to win. And how do we move forward, upholding who we are as a nation? And so I thank you for this opportunity. If anyone wants to get a hold of me, they can email me. All of our stuff is getting rebuilt at this time, but you can get a hold of me at jim@theguard1.com. We have a tremendous group of individuals that we spend time with, investing in. And the thing I want everybody to be very clear, that it's not a political group. It is a group of people that come together that want to strengthen their marriages, strengthen their parenting, strengthen friendships, get more balance in life. And so many of us, what we do for a living becomes the whole piece of the pie instead of just something we do. And individuals are way more diverse than just what they do. And so I've found that a lot of people are out of balance. And so we're investing in people and in talking about values and life and those types of things. So if anyone needs to get a hold of me, that's a great way to do it for right now. And again, I just thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you. And why don't you take us out, Carrion, with the Braver Angels pitch?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. And thanks so much to Julie and Jim for coming on and reminding our listeners why we do this. I think you guys really embody the spirit of Braver Angels, which is speaking from the heart and being true to yourself, but also being true to your fellow Americans. So thank you for that. And thank you to all our listeners. Love to get your feedback for the Braver Angels podcast. And as I mentioned, if you are intrigued or interested in what we do, we are a citizens movement. We are volunteer-led. Please get involved, subscribe to our mailing list, join us as a member. sign our public letter. And if you want to deepen your engagement, you can sign up to organize a discussion after the election within either the Hold America Together or the With Malice Toward None framework. If you have any questions, you can email info@braverangels.org. If you have any questions, suggestions, compliments, complaints about this podcast, you can email me at media@braverangels.org. And lastly, I just want to thank Carlos for setting this up and for bringing Jim into the fold. Hopefully talk to you again soon, Jim. And to all our listeners out there, over and out.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.